Welcome, Browns fans, to the Brownie Points podcast. This is your host, Noam, and my co-host,
Levi.
Great introduction, as always. Our first segment, we're going to talk about our big takeaway, what are our major thoughts from this game. Then we're going to get into the offense. We'll talk about the defense. And then, of course, our Brownie Points segment, as always. And then we'll do a look ahead, preview that game against the Seahawks. So, for our first segment, our big takeaway. What's your big takeaway from this game?
My big takeaway is that there's not much to take away from this game in a lot of ways. It's a very fluky game. It was a game that might have been the flukiest game I have seen ever, or at least in the last 5 years. Just bizarre. There was too many turnovers to count. When turnovers are just another stat in the game and not a pivotal moment where you're like, look at that turnover, it's just one of those weird games, and that's really how it went. I mean, there were turnovers every other minute. There were strip sacks and special teams plays, and again, I will say in a way, like the Niners, it almost felt like another game where you had to find a way to win, and you found a way to win where in so many other years, those are games you'll lose because of the games you find a way to lose. And instead, they're finding ways to win, so that's definitely a positive. But on a down-to-down basis, it's fluky and strange, and you didn't feel super confident about anything that happened in that game. It just kind of happened. You're happy that you won, and then you've got a lot of adjustments to make for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week, my big takeaway from the game was they didn't, as like I said, that game can't be the blueprint. This game certainly can't be the blueprint either. How rare is it for your team to score 39 points, and yet there's still somehow almost nothing to hang your hat on offensively? Like, coming into next week, what are they talking about? It's all disappointment. It's like, hey, Amari Cooper, we need more from you. I mean, who knows how much of that was necessarily his fault, but, we need more from Amari Cooper. We need more overall from the offensive line. Not that they were so horrible, but we need more from them. We need more from our quarterback. We need more all over the place, even though we scored 39 points, because like you said, it was such a fluky game. It was just flukes all over the place. Even the drives that didn't start with turnovers or some kind of a special teams play was really helped out by flags. Like there were flags all over the place. So that really helped that there. And you had, I think, a very controversial tweet during the game. You said, I don't remember at which point.
I put my name on it because I did want to make sure that it was clear that it was my take, and I didn't want you to get my smear.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that. At what point did you tweet that game, and what was that tweet?
So this is a little after, and after the Watson injury. This is a little bit after, and I basically said I wonder if he's secretly a little relieved, Stefanski, a little relieved to have P.J. Walker in the game. I don't think P.J. Walker's phenomenal, but the way Watson was playing has to make any head coach a little scared.
The way he was playing, today in that game? Because I wanted to throw hands with you on that one. Do you if the Browns are playing next week and you could choose Deshaun Watson or P.J. Walker to start?
Watson.
You're going to start Watson, right?
Walker's not good enough where you feel like, I'm riding into the game with him week in, week out. He's not really a bridge quarterback even. But so for those reasons, you have to ride with Watson because you have to hope that he starts to turn it around. And look, he has missed some games, therefore the sample size isn't as big as we'd like. And right now I'm at high concern. I'm not at panic, but I'm at high concern. And we're edging into panic because it is starting to get to a sample size point where you're wondering. But it was more of an on that day playing the Colts. Who do you feel like you should be playing at that point? Which I wouldn't normally bench Deshaun, but once he got injured, how do you feel about? Obviously you hope everybody feels better, but you got to wonder. He did get cleared to come back and didn't.
I wanted to talk about that because this is almost feeling like a recurring issue with Deshaun Watson, where he's kind of hurt, somewhat hurt. We're not even really sure. And it feels like Deshaun is trying to get out of every game possible, out of every minute possible. Whereas with Baker, we had the opposite situation, right? Where Baker was almost forcing himself into the games, and we were saying, hey, Kevin, maybe you need to take more of a stand here, be the coach, and tell him, hey, you can't play. It feels almost like the opposite is happening here with Deshaun, where management probably wants him to play, and it feels like Deshaun's like, I don't want to risk it. You know what I mean? And it'd be one thing if he was playing incredibly, but considering how he's been, if you play this seesaw all season, eventually we need you to play. So I don't know what this is from him. Do you think this is his personality? Is this just how he is? Are we going to be dealing with this forever? That he's just got to be, he's 100%er. He's got to be 100% to play.
So this is actually really good question. It really comes across on several points. So number one thing I always thought was interesting that we don't really talk about with him is he had a huge injury before he got suspended. He was out for a whole year. Nobody's seen him since the injury. And that may still be playing something of a role. You know, some guys never fully recover from an ACL. ACLs, sometimes big injuries, like we forget because of modern science and like it started to make it much more common, but some people don't. And for a guy who's heavily relied on athleticism throughout his career, sometimes you don't notice it so clearly, but that little difference is making more of a difference than you realize, like in terms of the end product. Like it's not that apparent, but if sometimes being thrown off by that extra second makes all the difference in the world in football. That being said, I feel like physically he hasn't looked that bad. It felt more like mental processing. And that's where the other point comes in when you're talking about fire. The guy's been out for 2 years. Maybe he enjoyed being off. He was off for 2 years. Now when you consider 2 years plus the off seasons, you know, he basically went like almost 3 years without playing football. Right? Yeah. 2.5 years, I think, for straight, and then 6 games, and then head off again. And
3 years of not getting hit by 300-pound, 6'6" defensive linemen.
And guess what? Last year, when he was suspended most of that year, he still made $45 million. He had all those years of partying, he's got millions of dollars. He's still a celebrity, making millions, being off. Maybe he really got to enjoy being off.
Do you think he got soft, basically?
Look, Conor McGregor did. After he fought, he's not been the same. He still has some. He's perfectly good. He's a good fighter. But he went from being a dominant fighter. After he made all that money, he took off for a while, and he came back, but he never came back. He lost his fire. He might have lost his fire.
I mean, Deshaun would not be the first player that we've ever seen to get a huge contract and then lose their fire. Especially if he is someone who might have been prone to something like that, right? Like once you get your bag, right, you cool off. Tristan Thompson. If he's that type of guy, taking a year off feels like it would pretty much guarantee that eventuality, right? Taking 2 years, 3 years, basically however long it was, where, yeah, he's not getting hit. You do have to wonder. I also wonder if potentially another layer that might have been in, and these, of course, could all be coming together, all working together. But you wonder if Deshaun, because we were talking about how his issues seem to be more with his mental processing versus his physicality. So we're like, how much is the injury really playing into that? I'm not really sure. Although sometimes your physical injury, even if it's not affecting you physically, can still affect you mentally because you're still worried about it. You're like, how am I leaning on? How am I doing this? So that can still affect you in that way. But if, let's just say he was completely mental processing, you wonder if he went out there, he threw that pick, and he was just feeling like, if he got a little shook.
Yeah, he nearly threw 2, so.
Yeah, you wonder if he just kind of got shook and he was just like, I'm not going back in. Just, it'll be better for the team. Just let them go, let them play, and then he'll like, I'll try again next week, right? It feels like he kind of took the easy way out on that one.
But here's the thing. You might have snuck away against the Seahawks. You might have snuck away against the Colts. And you might have got away with it against the Niners since the defense played so phenomenally. But sooner or later, you end up in a game where they're scoring and you're playing a good team. And this victory buys you time because the Niners victory really is based off the Niners victory, right? Like, this is a game you shouldn't have lost, but the game you shouldn't have won was the Niners. And that buys you time, but not forever.
Yeah, because the Browns are 4-2. So,
Right. So you have time, but you
That's
don't have
pretty
forever.
good. Yeah, exactly. But he needs to get back in there, and he needs reps to get back on there. I'm going to assume that because, look, he was coming back, and he looked okay in that game against the Steelers, or he wasn't that great. But then he looked significantly better, took a significant jump in that game against the Tennessee Titans. We were looking for him to take another step after that, but then he didn't play. So, maybe he was kind of maybe a little bit more of that type of trajectory potentially. He dips a little bit again, kind of like took 2 steps forward from the Tennessee Titans game, gets the injury, takes a step back, and then maybe, he needs to take another couple games to get back up there. Hopefully that's not the case, but that's kind of my prediction where I see this thing going.
What I'm worried about is when I watched him against the Titans, I still didn't feel like he was reading defenses. I still felt like he was throwing guys that are already open or Amari Cooper overcoming bad throws. And what makes you wonder is Elijah Moore had his best game of the season, 4 for 59. All of a sudden, he was a factor, making plays. And it's not like P.J. Walker was the whiz kid. He wasn't coming out there chucking bombs.
Yeah, but Elijah Moore is really mostly yards after the catch.
But not all of them. He had one really nice play and some yards after the catch. My point isn't merely that Elijah Moore is suddenly a superstar receiver. My point is suddenly there's somebody else making a couple plays. it just makes you wonder after a certain amount of time, why is there no second receiver? Then suddenly, I mean, these guys just do nothing and then they continue to do nothing. What's going on? Like at a certain point, these guys have produced in the past. And, it brings a lot of questions to Watson. It brings a lot of questions in that will test his mental acuity, his mental fortitude. Like, this is the time. Like, guess what? You've got a lot of doubters now. But guess what? You also got a lot of money, and you've earned those doubters. So at what point are you going to step up and tell everyone, no, you're wrong? Like, you have to. And on the other hand, I will say I do feel that Stefanski should be playing more of an RPO offense. It's what he does best. I know you want to do your offense, and you might be right that your offense might be better. But you can't tell a fish to climb a tree. It doesn't work. Climbing trees might be better for whatever it is you want to accomplish, but a fish still isn't going to climb a tree. You got a fish. Put him in the water, Get at that RPO offense. It's quick. It's one read. It's simpler. It uses his athleticism more, which is his bigger, that leans into what he has, his natural ability, and leans into what he does better. And then hopefully over time you can work on expanding to other offenses. But for now, you've got a season to play and games to win, and it's time to be a big boy and make the adjustments that are needed.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything there. The only thing I would contest is what you're saying about, the receivers and like wondering about that. I don't think I've seen enough as far as the receivers, as far as like who's performing in this game to say, how much of that might have been Deshaun Watson. But regardless, we both are definitely on the same page. Like, it's just a weird game offensively.
This game individually was
just bizarre. A really, really weird game offensively. And again, they scored 39 points, but somehow still not that much to talk about, really.
It's also a game of big plays, not just on defense, but offense too. Like, there was a lot of plays. A lot of the game, the offenses weren't having that many successful plays in a row, just one or two huge plays.
Yeah. All right, moving into the defense, another, I shouldn't say another, but a bit of a stinker from the defense. We talked about, in our preview last week, I said, hey, the Colts, we should beat the Colts. But the Colts aren't the kind of team that you can just completely fall asleep on. You can't walk in and just beat them, right? They were 3-3 coming into this. They weren't trash. Gardner Minshew is not garbage. If you give Gardner Minshew space, you give Gardner Minshew time, he does have the ability to beat you a little bit, not just with his arm, but with his legs, which is what we saw in that game. I think that was something that really showed how the Browns, at least at first, weren't really prepared for him. They kind of expected, I think, to win, because I don't think they really did their homework on him, because if you do your homework on Gardner Minshew, he has that ability. And against him and against other quarterbacks, we've done a better job of minding our gaps and keeping them contained. Quarterbacks who have that ability to scramble, Dutch done a better job overall this year. And against him, they didn't really do that. When he got out, there was acres of space, and I don't think they game planned for his running game in any way. And he killed us. He got two rushing touchdowns, I think. Yeah. So that's kind of tough. I mean,
he makes you smart.
Yeah, he was just the kind of team that you really couldn't do that against. So it was a bit of a disaster in that way. Certainly at the beginning, they kind of found a groove in the middle, and then they kind of lost their groove. I don't know. It was just a weird game defensively as well. Myles Garrett was obviously incredible. We'll talk about him more later, but I don't know. It's weird that the defense gave up 37 points against the Colts and gave up, a handful against the Niners, who were scoring 30 points every game coming into it.
Yeah, and it's really disappointing too, because you think of the Niners game and you say, and one thing I know I was saying, and we were saying that, isn't it great to see the Browns defense really show up, and we didn't feel like Myles Garrett just dominated?
Yeah, I mean, he was good in that game.
Today, it felt like old Browns. Bad defense. Myles Garrett dominating and doing his best to keep us alive, but not a good defense. Felt like days of old. Not in the good way.
What do you think it was, though, that killed? Because obviously the defense didn't perform. For me, I think what it mostly was, I think this defense came in and they thought they were going to be able to just dominate them without really doing the homework, without really being prepared. What do you think led us to the number one defense in the league coming into this game? What do you think led that team to give up 37 points to the Colts?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, for sure. I mean, there wasn't anything smacking you in the face. Like, what do you say? I mean, those big plays are kind of inexcusable, make no sense. You have a much better secondary than they have a receiving core. The receiving core isn't terrible, but you have a really good secondary. There was no reason to be burned that many times, especially to Minshew, who's solid, but not, a gunslinger exactly.
He's not the kind of guy that's going to carve you up no matter what you throw at him.
Right, and when you're the Browns defense, with the accolades you've been getting, but you got to look back on it too. 2 out of 3 weeks right now, bad defensive showings. That's a little disappointing. Now look,
What was a bad defensive showing against the Niners?
Ravens.
Two
out
the
of
Ravens.
3.
Right. I was thinking the last two. Right.
Sorry, no. The Niners was great.
Yeah.
But then you look at 2 out of 3 and you're saying bad, and you're wondering, like, are they going to be an inconsistent defense? Look at the Cowboys defense. They've been like that. They've had a couple games where they've just been kind of off. For the most part, really good, but a couple games off. Is that going to be the Browns defense? Is it going to be 4 out of 6 games are going to be good, but 2 of them are going to be stinkers?
I'll still be good. Like that's what most teams do. Like most units aren't elite every single time they go out there. The teams that are elite every single game, like throughout the course of an entire season, that's when you get to those historically great levels. When you're a great defense for 12 or 13 out of your 17 games, that's a great defense.
That's fair, but I don't think you have to be elite to give up less than 25 points to the Colts. With your level of talent, you should be able to just have a solid, like a good day, solid day, and give up 22 to 25. That's my point.
No, absolutely. And hopefully they can do better against the Seahawks next week. Again, we'll preview that a little bit later. But again, kind of like the offense where you're struggling to find talking points and things to really discuss. It was mostly just a stinker. Mostly just guys didn't really show up. But let's use that as an opportunity. Let's talk about the guys that did show up. Let's get into our Brownie Points segment. Who showed up for you? Let's go to the offense first. And if you're a first-time listener, which everyone should be because I'm pretty sure we're the only listener so far, the Brownie Point segment is where we award 3 brownie points, 2 brownie points, and 1 brownie point to the guys on offense, and then we give the same thing on defense. So it's basically our version of our little award show, which we do every game to give shout-outs to the players that we think perform best on both sides of the ball. Who do you have 3 points being the most, being the best? Who do you have at 3 brownie points?
Well, for 3 brownie points on the offense, I think we both agreed on this. It's DeAndre Hopkins. And wow, what a pickup. We were wondering about our kicking game coming in. They got Hopkins. I liked the move. I didn't know he'd be this good, but I liked the move. I said, hey, he's solid under 40. He has some talent. He could be solid from 45 to 50 and definitely good under 40. Let's go with it. Boy, has he been great. What a leg. 250-plus yarders. He had a 58-yard kick. He actually set a franchise record for the most 50-yard kicks in a row to begin a season in games in the first 5 games in a row. Yeah, and 58, and he nailed it. That was good from 62, 63, easy. Just nailed it. Was phenomenal. He's been great all year. He's missed 1 field goal all year. He's been really good, and he has hit 50 yards right in 5 games in a row. Like they're not always putting him in at chip shot range. He's hitting deep whenever asked, and we needed every single point in this game, and even when he was put in bad positions, he still came through every single time. He was the only really outstanding performer on offense, I think, all day, more or less.
Yeah, 50-yard field goals from your kicker are so valuable. If you're a guy that can hit those consistently, or like mostly consistently, it brings so much value to your offense, and that's why we got to give him 3 brownie points, even though he's a kicker. Like usually, even if a kicker does well, they kind of get 1. We've given him 1 before. Sometimes I think we kind of considered him at 2. But at 3, but he deserves it. Hitting, I think what was it, 3 50-yard field goals or something? Is it 3? Unbelievable. But those 50-yard field goals are so crucial because it helps you on so many different levels, those 50-yard field goals. 1, it turns a not such a great drive into points. So there's value there. 2, because you're kicking a 50-yarder, you're closer to that midway line. Whereas if you miss and you don't get those 3 points, the other team now is basically guaranteed to get 3 points because all they need is like 20 yards to get that. Right? So it's kind of a high risk situation where if you don't get it, you're giving the other team a huge possession. So you're trying to turn a bad possession into points, but if you mess up on that, now they get points on you. So having a kicker that you can rely on, which we've basically never had since Phil Dawson, is incredible on numerous layers for the Browns. But like for me, like I just want to, I'm going to give you my joke. Not my joke, but like my half serious brownie points on offense, and then I'll get into my more serious brownie points on offense. But for me, at 3 brownie points, I do have Dustin Hopkins.
Dustin Hopkins. I said DeAndre by mistake.
Yeah, you were saying that. Yeah, Dustin Hopkins. At 2 brownie points, I got Miles Garrett, and then at 1 brownie point on offense, I got the refs. That's kind of my joke, but
you don't mean Miles Garrett.
I'm being No, I did mean Miles Garrett.
Miles Garrett's defense.
I know.
Oh, but the offense.
Miles Garrett arguably was the most valuable outside of Dustin Hopkins. Arguably was the most valuable player to our offense, considering, remember, he got that ball out in the end zone, which directly led us to a score. Had the other blocked field goal directly leading to scores. Like his impact directly led to scores. You could draw a line from Myles Garrett to the points we scored. So you actually have a real argument to make. And obviously the refs there at the end of the game, they kind of handed it to us. I'm not saying that they were bogus calls, but they definitely helped us out a little bit.
But
and
Myles
that last
Garrett,
one, that illegal contact, that was an uncatchable ball. We got a little bit of a break on that one, which is nice to see. But
Myles Garrett doesn't get Employee of the Year just because they would not get sales in the Browns office without him being there.
Yeah, no. So that's kind of like my half serious one. You could make arguments for that, obviously, but in all seriousness, at 2 brownie points, I'm gonna have DeJuan Jones. I think he was actually the best player on the offensive line, which is pretty surprising because Joel Bitonio was back. Not that Joel Bitonio was trash, but he wasn't really that great. Neither was Wyatt Teller. DeJuan Jones was the only guy who actually looked decent. He graded out. PFF had him at 70, which was the highest for the offensive line. Really impressive for him as a rookie. I think he's probably the best rookie offensive lineman we've had since Joel Bitonio so far.
Yeah, Bitonio came after Mac, so
yeah,
I would have to go with
through
Bitonio.
5 games.
Yeah, I mean, but what a pickup, right? 4th round pick.
Yeah,
and he's playing his first year. We thought he was a project.
And you liked him. You called it at the beginning of the year. You talked to me a lot before the season started about DeJuan Jones. And you said, like, hey, he's going to be good. I really like him. He might take a little bit of time to develop, but he's got so much talent. He's got so much in him. And then I hadn't really looked into him before that. But then when I saw him in that first game, I was jumped all the way on board because I really paid attention to him in that game. And we talked about, his footwork was so incredible for a guy at his size. Like, tools-wise, he was amazing, and he put it together in that first game. He was like a little bit worse in that second game, but overall through 5 games, he's been very impressive. One of the best rookie offensive linemen, I think, in the league, arguably.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now Andrew Berry is definitely putting him on his PowerPoint list of why he shouldn't lose his job. We'll see how things go this season, because that's the scary part of how when things go bad at quarterback position. It's not over yet, but if things continue to go bad, that's when it can get dicey. But that's another story.
Certainly Jimmy Haslam might hold some grudges against him for convincing him to hand him all that cash that you can't get out of. So if it does go south, even if he doesn't deserve it, which he might, but even if he doesn't deserve it, you do think Andrew Berry would get, because that's just how the NFL works in general. Plus in this situation, even more so because of the money that they gave him, and the situation that they're in, because they are screwed if Deshaun Watson doesn't play like a superstar.
But number 2 in the brownie points for me, however, is my favorite Browns offensive player for a while now is Njoku, David Njoku.
Really? At 2 brownie points?
I would give him 2.
That feels like a stretch to me.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to give it to him anyway.
It wasn't all the offensive brownie points are a little bit of a stretch today. Like DeJuan Jones was not a world beater today. He was just good, which for a rookie is very
and
good.
I didn't feel like he was playing against good defensive line, I didn't give him a brownie point for that reason. I still think he played well, and I like him. Give it to him. Njoku, I just feel like he's playing with PJ Walker. He's not playing with a good offense or anything like that. And I just think when you watch him, it didn't feel like he was given a lot of easy plays. And he got a lot after the catch. And he had one play which I think was extremely underrated, where it was like a 7-yard gain, but it was near the end of the half, right? And clock was running down. What does he do? He breaks the tackle and gets 3 more yards, gets the first down, and then gets out of bounds. Most players go down in bounds before the first down. You're trying to get that first down. You got a 3rd down. You got to deal with that. The clock's running. We don't get those points without him breaking a tackle and getting out of bounds plus that first down. And that wasn't the only play. I just felt like that was emblematic of the kind of plays he's been consistently making for a little while now. It's just he catches 3-4 balls a game, every game lately, that they bother to get him involved, and he shows what he can do and does more with it than what's been given to him by the field, by the play. And it's also part of my campaign to get him more touches. Get Njoku more touches. He's a freak show.
Yep. Every single week when he touches the ball, he does well. So I don't know. Maybe they're working on it. I don't know, man. But they definitely need to get him involved more than they are right now. Who do you got at 1 brownie point, though?
I think we're agreed on this one. It's actually Jerome Ford. He probably would be looking at 2 if he would have been healthy. Who knows? Maybe 3. I mean, Hopkins is still kicker, so if Ford was playing anywhere near as good as he started that game at, who knows? But ultimately, there was the injury. He had that phenomenal run. He looked really good. Hopefully he can come back soon. But you do have to admit, like, just looking at him and some of the big plays he's made, he looks like an excellent complement to Chubb in the future, and a really nice back to have in the future for, a couple games here and there as a spell. Nice pick. He looks good, and he had some phenomenal burst. Showed some chops. Like, he's actually been learning a little bit over these weeks and getting a little better with the vision and when to cut and make the move. And you're seeing a difference. You're seeing a really nice running back emerge from that disastrous first couple touches he had.
Yeah, I think he's settling in to his role. I think he's settling into that RB position. And like that was something I wanted to touch on too. I think he looked a lot better with when it comes to his patience. You saw him on a couple of those runs, just giving that extra pause, a little extra hesitation, waiting for those blocks to develop, waiting for that hole to open, and then hitting it. I didn't know he had that kind of top end speed, to be completely honest. I thought he was gonna get caught as he was, bursting through the defenders. But hey, I mean, I'll take it.
Happy he didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Happy he didn't, so I'll take it. So yeah, he had that 70-yard run. Probably would have done more in that game, but you got to give him his props for that 70-yard touchdown run. Obviously, all the points were important. It was a close game at the end. What's moving into the defense? Who do you have at 3 brownie points? Who's your number one defensive player for the game? I'm sure it's a big surprise.
Yeah, it's Juan Thornhill. No, it is most definitely Myles Garrett, and it's just I almost don't even like this segment just because I know you should give props where it's due, but it just kind of feels like anybody could tell you this. I mean, this is box score punditry. It's not really. It's like all those games going, Nick Chubb is good. Like, oh, really? Myles Garrett had one of those games that reminds you of his top-end talent, what an athletic freak he is. Just that he has those games where he dominates, and this is it. Like, he absolutely dominated in all facets. Whenever he was on the field, he dominated the whole field as much as he could. And obviously, he's 3-star. I mean, that was just a special game.
Yeah, like his ability to come up big in those crucial moments, that end of those 2 minutes, he basically closed that gap for us by himself pretty much in those last 2 minutes. Myles Garrett just said, hey, I'm going to take care of this. It's just absolutely incredible. The way he leaped that line at the line of scrimmage to block that kick. We talked about those a little bit before. Like, usually when guys do that, they need a little bit of a runway in order to just leap over people. Because, they're not basketball players. They got a lot of muscle on them. They're not, especially defensive linemen, they're not working on their verticality that much. They're not trying to make sure they can jump 40 inches in the air and dunk it. They're working on speed and power. But that's a whole other thing, right? Like, so defensive linemen, to jump over somebody, even if you're athletic, at 270, 280 pounds, you need a little bit of run up. But not Myles. Myles just stood there and just went, whee! And just popped right over him to block the kick. I hadn't seen that move in years. That was incredible to watch. I thought it was illegal to do that. I thought they made that illegal. Was that just... Did they just make it that you can't...
I think it's just the one snapping.
You can't leap the center? The one
snapping the ball, the long snapper. I think that's the rule.
I think they also made you can't...
Because of the way they come up and they can't.
Yeah. I know you also can't touch the offensive lineman at all when you jump them. If you touch them, it's over. So you got to nail it. And then obviously the timing is important too, but I love those plays. They're so cool to watch. It's always fun to watch somebody jumping over people. So
I always thought it was weird that wasn't a problem, but... They'll be like, oh, you can't touch that lineman. But then when Antonio Brown kicks our punter in the face,
yeah,
Spencer Lanning on purpose goes out of his way to kick him in the face, and they're like, oh, that looks like fun.
I think today he would have gotten flagged. I think in the modern NFL though,
he still should have back then.
He should have back then.
He went
too.
out of his way to kick him. Do you remember that play?
No, I do remember that play.
Went out of his way.
He karate kicked him.
But it was also easy. He could have easily. It was easier for him to just run straight and literally he was so far ahead of him. He just had to curve barely and go around him. He literally went out of his way to make contact with him. Yeah. There was no reason. By the way, wasn't that a red flag?
Oh, yeah, Antonio Brown, yeah. I mean, people talk about, how much head damage is going on. I think it's pretty clear he's got to be got CT or something going on, but he was always a little.
But you never know. Some people are
He was always a little bit,
off.
yeah. And some people, yeah. And then your life circumstances can allow certain things to, the reins to be pulled off you a little bit. Yeah, especially once you get your money, things can start to change. Organizations can back off you a little bit as you start doing better. You get more range, and some people just abuse that range. But this is not an Antonio Brown segment, so and obviously you could talk about. There's going to be a 30 for 30 about him eventually from ESPN. There'll be documentaries about
that's going to be whatever 90 the hell for 90. Whatever the hell is going on. 30.
Whatever the hell is going on with Antonio Brown. Unfortunately, it's probably going to end up with him in jail. But yeah, but moving on from him, at 2 brownie points for the defense, for me, I had Dalvin Tomlinson. I don't think he was spectacular. Again, nobody was really spectacular in that game outside of Myles Garrett. But Dalvin Tomlinson, I think, was decent. He had some pressure. He was fairly consistent throughout the game. Just overall, a decent, solid game. For me, I'm willing to give him 2 brownie points for that. But at 1... Oh, sorry. I'm giving him a 1 brownie point. I'm sorry, my apologies. 1 brownie point. He wasn't, not that spectacular. And at 2, I have no brownie points. I don't have anybody this week at number 2. Which, again, not that much of a surprise. He gave up 37 points. There's obviously not that many standouts because if there were, it would have been 37 points given up, despite it being a bit of a fluky game. But even so, the defense was obviously not spectacular. So for me, I got Myles Garrett at 3, Dalvin Thompson at 1, but no one at number 2. And who do you got at 2 brownie points?
So actually, I also have no 2 brownie points. I was thinking about none for 1 either. I was considering... I'm not going to give it to Tomlinson. I think he played fine, but ultimately there was plenty of bursts from that run game. I'm not enthusiastic with how that played out. I'm actually going to give 1, though, to Juan Thornhill. I thought he made a couple nice tackles. And I think in general he's helped with leadership for the season, and it's kind of a season shout-out type of thing, as well as him coming up and having some big tackles.
He did have some nice tackles. A lot of blown coverages in this play, but a lot of miscommunications, which was uncharacteristic for the defense coming into this one. That's what threw me off.
You would think that they could just play man and cover him with the amount of talent we have.
Yeah, if you're playing man-to-man, you got beat a couple times. I'm like, all right, that's going to happen sometimes, but the miscommunications hurt. Yeah.
All right, well, that's a brownie point segment.
Yeah, let's look ahead to the Seahawks. I mean, obviously right now, overall, for everything there is to talk about the game or not to talk about that game, the Browns are 4-2. And I'll take it. If you told me before the season started that 6 games in, the Browns would be 4-2, I'd be like, yeah, sounds about right. That sounds good. I'll take it. So I think we got to overall be happy with that. Looking ahead to the Seahawks game, how do you think that's going to look? What do you think we should be looking out for?
This one's a difficult one to track because which defense is going to show up? If it's the really good 49ers defense, then we got a chance no matter who we play. And certainly against Seattle, who just lost to the Bengals, put up only 14 points all game. And they had some opportunities to put up more. Now, what's interesting is, despite them not being seen as exactly the biggest juggernaut passing offense, I would say this is the receiving core that tests our secondary the most. They might be the best receiving core in the league.
I think DK's out, though.
Oh, is DK out?
I think he's out for a couple weeks.
Okay. I say when they're healthy, they are. Because if you look at DK, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, that is just a phenomenally talented receiving core. But I guess if DK's out, it's not quite the same. But you are dealing with a lot of talent, so you still got to look out for that. The Seahawks are a very good team. They're 4-2 as well. They just barely lost to the Bengals, so that's a little rough one for them to swallow. But they did beat the Lions. They are a good team. They're no joke. This is the second year in a row where they're good, so it's not a fluke. You're going to have to really come in there and play tough. That defense is going to have to come in there and have one of their better games. And we're probably going to need that. And the big question is which Watson shows up. I do think he'll play. He was cleared to play in the middle of the game, so he should be playing now. The question is, who shows up?
What level do you see Deshaun Watson playing? And if we're grading this as far as where you think you'd be, meaning the bottom being a backup quarterback to backup quarterback to starter to good starter to franchise QB to superstar. How do you think he plays against the Seahawks?
Well, one thing is I don't think he'll look quite as bad as he did at the beginning of the Colts game, because the one thing about that Colts game, again, processing was awful. But part of that is also he did not practice all week.
Yeah, but never mind. I was going to say, wasn't that pick one was really hard, but I think that was PJ Walker, right? Blackman, the guy with the safety, ran across half the entire field to make that pick. I think that one was PJ Walker.
I think it was PJ, yeah. He had one that was picked up, but it was not that crazy of a pick. He was right there. And then one that was dropped. It was a bit of fluke. That was not
they didn't
throw.
complete that.
Under, but he didn't practice all week, and that can throw people off a lot more than some of us like to realize. We forget about that. So he's going to practice all week,
especially because he's ramping up, right?
Seattle Seahawks defense is good. I'd probably put him at. I think he's sadly going to play similar level to what PJ Walker is playing at. Somewhat solid backup-y, but not much above that.
I think he's going to
I just hope he's got to cut out the mistake parts, because that we can't afford, because we haven't seen this offense play at a level to get over those.
Yeah. I disagree a little bit. I think Deshaun is going to be better than PJ Walker, obviously. I think he's going to be a little bit below, like over the course of the game. I think, he might come off a little bit weak, but I think over the course of the game, when it's done, I think we'll see him as a little bit below what he did against the Titans, because the Titans, he was good against the Titans. 27-33. Like, that was a good game from him. I think a little bit below that, but I think he'll look like a starter again. I think against that team, provided he practices all week, because again, he's ramping up. He's trying to get back into things for a guy that hasn't played in a long time. Not, having a week of practice is not the same thing. Like, for the reason why veterans and things like that don't need that time is because they've been doing this forever. They can just walk right in and do it, but they also haven't been out of the game for 3 years. When you've been out of the game for a long time, 2-3 years, you gotta be in it. He's been back in football for less time than he was out of football.
And those veterans usually know that offense already. So, he hasn't mastered the offense yet, so you can't just...
Yeah, they're not new guys to the team usually.
Yeah.
Right. Even if they're veterans, if they're new to the team, often they'll still show up for OTAs and extra things like that.
My prediction... Are we going to do predictions?
Yeah, let's do a prediction. If you got one.
Well, nobody's going to like me, but I'm picking the Seahawks to win 2017.
Yeah. I actually... Unfortunately, I'm in agreement with you. I do think they're going to lose... I don't want them to, obviously. But I think that win against the Niners, that win against the Colts, they got some help in both of those games. I think not karma, but I think their luck's going to run out. I think against the Seahawks. And the Seahawks are a decent team. They're capable of beating us. So it's already a game that was looked at as a toss-up. I think, and that combined with the Browns coming off these very emotional, very tight games where we got the favorable edge of luck, we got the favorable calls. I don't see that happening again against the Seahawks. I think it's going to catch up to us. I think the Browns are going to end up losing that game. I do think the defense as a unit, though, will come back. I think if the Browns win that game, and this will be very indicative of how good this defense really is, because something that from the great teams, like, and this goes for any sport pretty much, but for the great teams, when they get embarrassed, they come back with a vengeance. And if this Browns defensive unit is truly special, if they really are a special unit, and this was a fluke game, then next week against the Seahawks, they're going to be lights out against the Seahawks. So if that happens, if they come in and they keep the Seahawks under 14 points, I think the Browns will win that game, but obviously that's not much of a take to say if you keep the opposing team under 14 points, you're going to win. But I'm saying is that's the scenario. I think if they win, I think that's what it looks like. I think that's how we get that win. Like, I don't foresee another shootout and the Browns winning that. I think if the Seahawks come out here and they score 25 points, I think the Browns probably would end up losing that game. So, man, our scores have been so off recently. But obviously, scores are so hard to predict. For me, for the score in this game, I think the Browns are going to blow it 27-24. I think they're going to give up a little bit more than they'd like to. I think the defense is overall going to play well, but the Seahawks are a good team. They're going to give up, I think, a few possessions more than they'd like to. So I see the Seahawks scoring about 27, 24 points. The Browns somewhere between 21 and 24.
So just to clarify, though, when I said 2017, though, I actually think the offense is going to have that turnover that lets the defense score an easy touchdown. So I do think the defense plays really well.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're wrong. We've been wrong fairly consistently with the predictions. So hopefully we're wrong. And hopefully we got another victory Monday to look forward to. And we'll see you next week. We said that at the same time.